Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take history's most captivating concepts, trace them across continents and millennia, and figure out how their meaning secretly reveals more about us than about the thing itself.
And today, we're focusing on an animal that is, well, defined by its impossibility. Yet it has perhaps one of the longest, richest, and most consistently evolving identities in all of global lore. We're tracking the life and times of the unicorn.
Let's start with that visual shorthand we all have. When you hear unicorn, you see the classic high fantasy image. A snow-white, elegant creature, sometimes horse-like, sometimes a bit more like a goat.
And crowned by that single, massive, pointed, spiraling horn projecting right from its forehead. It's become the ultimate symbol of purity and grace.
But that classic look, that's really a product of centuries of European refinement, right? Solidified during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance.
Exactly. Our mission today is to track the unicorn's profound, multi-phased identity crisis. It began as a beast of disputed physical origin in Asia, evolved into this powerful Christian allegory.
Which, paradoxically, fueled one of the biggest medical frauds in history.
A huge one. And then it finally settled into its modern role as an emblem of rarity and uniqueness, especially within the LGBTQ community.
That is just an astonishing trajectory for an imaginary creature. So, to get our bearings, let's establish that peak European identity first. How did the Middle Ages really define its character?
In the medieval period, it was all about two things: untamed ferocity and absolute purity. It was understood to be this fierce, wild woodland creature, impossibly fast, and you just couldn't capture it by brute force.
Right. But there was a catch.
There was a catch. The common wisdom, spread through all the bestiaries, was that its aggressive nature could only be subdued by a single, powerful moral force, a virgin maiden.
So its own power was its downfall, in a way. It only responded to innocence. That concept of untouchable uniqueness, it clearly resonated so deeply, and it still does today, even though the religious context has mostly faded.
Absolutely. That enduring sense of rarity is what underpins its modern identity. In the 21st century, the unicorn's status is not just about fantasy, but its potent role as an icon of uniqueness, of otherness, of gender fluidity.
Making it a critical symbol for the queer community. It's a remarkable cultural repurposing of a creature that was, as you said, once used to symbolize the incarnation of Christ.
An incredible shift.
That sets the stage perfectly. So if we really want to understand where this all began, we have to look far beyond medieval Europe, far beyond the Greeks and Romans even. We have to go back to the Bronze Age in South Asia.
We have to begin with the Indus Valley Civilization, the IVC, flourishing around 2000 BC. This was a highly advanced urban civilization, and it produced thousands of these standardized soapstone stamp seals.
And on these seals, the most common image is, astonishingly, a single-horned creature.
It is. But this IVC unicorn is definitely not the elegant horse we see in tapestries.
So what did it look like exactly?
It's distinctly bovine. Much more like a cow or an ox than a horse. It has a heavy muscular body, and its horn is really unique. It projects forward from the forehead before curving sharply upward, right at the tip.
And these seals are pretty small, weren't they?
Very small, maybe 1.5 inches square. And given how standardized they were, and how often this image appears, it clearly represents something profoundly important to the IVC economy and society.
So scholars think it was some kind of powerful marker. Maybe religious or communal.
The main hypothesis is that this image served as an emblem for a powerful clan, or maybe a specific merchant community. You can almost think of it like a corporate logo or a guild crest.
Because they were used to stamp clay tags on bundles of goods.
Exactly. So the unicorn's presence basically guaranteed the origin and quality of the shipment. It was an identity marker, deeply entwined with the huge trade network of the IVC.
What's also strange is that the unicorn is almost always shown with this mysterious vertical object in front of it. The pairing seems inseparable.
It's so consistent. In over 80% of the depictions, the object itself has led to intense debate. Is it a ritual offering stand? An incense burner?
Or something more mundane, like a manger.
Some early archaeologists thought so. Whatever it was, the fact that the unicorn is consistently interacting with it tells us it wasn't just an animal. It was central to some kind of narrative, a religious or communal story.
Okay, we have to address the big question here, the point of skepticism. Since the animal is always in profile, how are we so sure it's a single horn and not just one horn hiding the other?
That's the fundamental question, and the evidence really does support the single horn interpretation. for two main reasons.
Mhm.
First, on other seals, the IBC artists were clearly capable of showing animals in profile with both horns visible, like bulls, so they could do it if they wanted to.
Ah, so it was an artistic choice.
It seems so.
Yeah.
And second, we have found a few three-dimensional terracotta figures, probably toys or ritual objects, that unambiguously show this bovine creature with just one horn. So the concept was singular.
So it was conceived as a one-horned beast. And yet, this incredibly powerful, ubiquitous symbol just vanishes. What happened?
It disappears completely from South Asian art after the IVC collapses, around 1900 BC. The civilization broke apart for complex reasons: climate change, shifting monsoons, and the symbols of its trade and governance just ceased to be relevant.
But the idea of a powerful, unique, one-horned animal must have been geographically contagious. I mean, they were trading with West Asia.
Precisely. While the image didn't survive, the idea of a fantastical, powerful, one-horned animal may have filtered into West Asian lore, providing this ancient conceptual foundation centuries before the Greeks ever wrote about it.
And speaking of the Greeks, that brings us into classical antiquity, where the unicorn takes this massive leap into the historical record, not as a myth, but as a zoological fact, or so they believed.
That is the crucial difference. Unicorns were not in Greek mythology. Greek writers on natural history, people like Ctesias and Pliny, they treated them as real exotic animals living in the distant, fabulous realm of India.
So the earliest detailed written description comes from this Greek physician, Ctesias, in the late 5th century BC. What was his Indian unicorn like?
Ctesias described them as wild asses, and he emphasized their incredible speed. They were exceedingly fleet of foot, he said. And the horn, he claimed, was about 28 inches long and had this striking, almost impossible color scheme: white at the base, black in the middle, and intensely red at the tip.
Wow, so we've moved from a cow in the Indus Valley to a speedy, tricolored wild ass. And this creature's horn was supposed to have a practical use, wasn't it?
Yes, Ctesias noted that drinking cups made from the horn prevented the drinker from suffering convulsions or falling sick from poisons. This is the first recorded instance of the unicorn horn's legendary anti-poisonous properties.
A belief that would drive a whole industry centuries later.
Oh, absolutely. Ctesias also added a slightly funny detail. The meat of the wild ass was supposedly too bitter to eat.
So if Ctesias gave us the speedy wild ass, Pliny the Elder, writing a few centuries later, gave us something much more monstrous. He called it the monoceros.
Pliny created a truly terrifying chimeric beast. He wrote of a very fierce animal with a stag's head, the feet of an elephant, a boar's tail, and a horse-like body. It made this deep lowing noise and had a single black horn, about 35 inches long.
That's a Frankenstein's monster of an animal. It sounds like they were just stitching together the scariest parts of reports from Asia.
That's exactly what it was. And later writers made the connection even clearer. Alien, in the 2nd century AD, noted that the monoceros was sometimes called Cartazonos. And this is a key linguistic clue, because Cartazonos is almost certainly related to the Arabic word Karkatan.
Which means rhinoceros.
Exactly. The stories were a conflation, a massive game of telephone blending reports of speedy wild asses with reports of the very real, very fierce, one-horned Indian rhinoceros.
And we can't talk about this confusion without mentioning the ultimate reality check, Marco Polo. He actually saw one in the 13th century.
His account is just magnificent because of the contrast. He was clearly looking at a rhinoceros. He said they were scarcely smaller than elephants, had hair like a buffalo, and loved wallowing in mud and slime.
And he did not mince words about the cognitive dissonance, did he?
Not at all. He bluntly concluded they were very ugly brutes to look at and stressed they were clean, contrary to our notions of letting themselves be captured by virgins. Here was a man seeing the muddy, ugly truth.
But the beautiful fantasy in Europe was already too strong to be stopped by facts.
It was. By the time Polo wrote his account, the unicorn was already transitioning from a zoological curiosity into a moral and religious metaphor.
Which takes us right into the Middle Ages and Renaissance, where it sheds its monstrous real-world skin and becomes pure allegory.
This is where its symbolic power just explodes. And the foundational text for this is the Physiologus. It was a Greek Christian text from late antiquity that became one of the most influential books of the entire Middle Ages.
So how did the Physiologus redefine the unicorn?
It formalized the central allegory. It took the idea of the unicorn's untamed nature and added the key detail for its capture. It could only be trapped by a maiden, who of course symbolized the Virgin Mary.
And the unicorn would see her, lay its head in her lap, and fall asleep,
allowing the hunters to capture it. And this whole scenario stood for the incarnation of Christ. The unicorn was Christ's untamed divinity who humbled himself to be contained within the Virgin Mary, allowing his capture for humanity's salvation.
What a potent metaphor. But that symbolism wasn't just for church. How quickly did it get co-opted for, say, courtly love?
Almost immediately. For 13th century French authors, the analogy was direct. The lover is drawn to his lady's purity, just as the unicorn is to the virgin. It became an emblem of chaste devotion and faithful marriage.
Right, like in Petrarch's Triumph of Chastity, or on the back of Piero della Francesca's portrait of Battista Sforza, her chariot is pulled by unicorns to symbolize her fidelity.
The perfect visual shorthand for aristocratic virtue.
But we can't talk about this era without discussing the horn itself, the alicorn.
Yes, the alicorn. This was the term for the horn substance. And fueled by those ancient accounts from Ctesias, the belief that it had miraculous medicinal properties was a dominant feature of medieval and Renaissance courts.
What were the specific claims?
They were huge. It was said to be an infallible antidote to poison. It could purify water just by being dipped in it, and it could cure everything from epilepsy to the plague. For kings terrified of assassination, it was a matter of national security.
So I imagine these things were expensive.
Astronomically so. In the 16th century, a single narwhal tusk, which was the primary substitute, could be worth 10 times its weight in gold. Queen Elizabeth I had one valued at 10,000 pounds, enough to build a warship.
And the source for these was, of course, the narwhal, an Arctic whale. The fraud was built on keeping that origin a secret.
Absolutely. The horns were sourced from the Arctic, often shrouded in mystery to maintain the illusion that they came from a magical beast in India.
So when did the reality check finally arrive?
The definitive scientific proof came in 1638. A Danish physician, Ole Worm, systematically examined the so-called alicorns, compared them to narwhal skulls, and proved conclusively that the unicorn horn was the tusk of a whale.
And that collapsed the market, right?
Not at all. The power of belief was too strong. False alicorn powder continued to be sold for another century. The symbol mattered far more than the material truth.
Incredible. And that symbol was being captured in these magnificent works of art, like the famous tapestries.
Yes, the Hunt of the Unicorn tapestries, from around 1500, a monumental work that combines the secular hunt with the religious allegory.
Let's talk about that last panel, the unicorn in captivity. It's so beautiful, but a little confusing. He's alive and well.
It's a scene of intentional ambiguity and reconciliation. The unicorn is alive and happy in a fenced garden chained to a pomegranate tree. It's widely seen as representing the resurrection or the peaceful surrender of the spirit to divine love.
And those red stains on its side, they're not blood.
A popular theory is that they're not blood from the hunt, but juice from the pomegranates on the tree. The pomegranate itself is a symbol of fertility and resurrection, so it transforms the image from captivity to renewal.
It's fascinating how science starts to push back on this, forcing the unicorn to adapt again. Once it's not a real animal anymore, it can't really be used in serious religious art.
Exactly. The Council of Trent eventually banned some of the more elaborate depictions. The unicorn was pushed out of natural history and high theology, but it still needed a job, and it found one in statecraft and national identity.
It transitions into the world of heraldry.
Seamlessly. Here it represented pure, untamed, formidable power. The heraldic unicorn is a composite, a horse's body, but with a goat's cloven hooves and beard, a lion's tail, and that spiral horn.
And its symbolism in heraldry is all about being untamable. You see that in the visual, right?
That is the absolute key. It's often shown collared and chained, but it's far more usually depicted with a broken chain hanging from the collar.
That broken chain is so powerful. What does it signify?
It means that while it may have been captured, its spirit is fundamentally untamed. It has broken free from its bondage. It symbolizes a fiercely independent nation or house that prizes its liberty above all else.
Which brings us, of course, to Scotland.
Exactly. Scotland adopted the unicorn as its national animal back in the 15th century. And crucially, the unicorn was believed to be the natural enemy of the lion.
Which was the symbol of England. A bit of symbolic warfare.
A very deliberate piece of symbolic defiance. And so, historically, 2 unicorns supported the royal arms and the King of Scots. After the Act of Union, it became 1 lion and 1 unicorn supporting the arms of the UK.
And even today, the version of the royal arms used in Scotland gives the unicorn the place of honor.
It does. It remains a symbol of unbroken national pride. It was even on their coins, the unicorn and half unicorn.
We've tracked it across Europe, but the word unicorn was often a mistranslation, wasn't it, like in the Bible?
Yes. The Hebrew Bible mentions the Reem, which we now know was the aurochs, the wild ox. But when it was translated into Greek, they used monoceros, single-horned. The Latin Vulgate used unicornus.
And the King James translators just followed that tradition.
They did. So Western culture inherited a biblical endorsement for the unicorn's existence purely through a translation choice.
And what about outside Europe, the so-called Chinese unicorn?
The quillin, which is really more of a chimera, a deer's body, a lion's head, green scales. It's a bringer of good fortune.
But it got connected to a real animal at one point.
It did, brilliantly.
Yeah.
In the 15th century, when the Admiral Zheng, he brought giraffes back to China from Africa, the court scholars needed a name for this peaceful, exotic creature.
And they decided it was the quillin.
They did. The giraffe's horn-like ossicones, its gentle nature, it fit the description of the auspicious quillin perfectly.
It's remarkable how the search for the unicorn keeps landing us back at real but unusual animals. The rhino, the narwhal, the giraffe. But now we take this final, massive leap into the modern age.
We have to discuss the unicorn as a queer icon. By the 21st century, it became this huge symbol, second only, really, to the rainbow flag for the LGBTQ community.
The connection to rainbows is visually obvious, but the symbolic resonance is much deeper, isn't it?
It is. People in the queer community point to a few key themes. The first is uniqueness. The unicorn is intrinsically rare. It exists outside the normal rules. And for many queer individuals, that reflects their own unique identity in a world that often demands conformity.
That makes so much sense, that feeling of being one of a kind.
Then there's its magical quality. It exists outside of society's reality, and that resonates with people whose own existence can feel like it blurs traditional norms of masculinity and femininity.
And elusiveness, too. The idea that it's hard to pin down.
Exactly. It resists being easily defined or labeled, which mirrors the desire to define oneself on one's own terms.
And finally, there's gender fluidity. This is fascinating because it loops all the way back through its history.
It really does. For centuries, the unicorn was always male, this fierce beast tamed by a maiden. But in modern pop culture, especially in queer contexts, the unicorn is often depicted as feminine or androgynous or fluid. That ability for its core identity to shift gender makes it a perfect non-binary representation.
What an astonishing, sprawling journey. I mean, we've taken this creature from a possible cow on a Bronze Age seal,
through the bloody, mixed-up accounts of wild asses and rhinos, into its central role as a medieval allegory for Christ's purity.
We've seen its horn go from priceless medicine, the alicorn, to a narwhal tusk, and then watched it become a symbol of Scottish defiance against the English lion.
A symbol that was scientifically dismantled but just kept ascending culturally.
And it arrives in the 21st century not just as a figure of fantasy, but as a modern emblem of rarity, uniqueness, and the powerful reality of gender fluidity. It's an animal that spent thousands of years searching for its identity, and maybe only now has found a role that truly embraces everything it represents.
The unicorn's true strength was never physical. It was its ability to symbolize the rare and the untouchable. For an animal that was proven to be imaginary centuries ago, its story shows us that the most powerful symbols are those that allow us to define our own untamed nature and our highest aspirations.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you. Given the heraldic unicorn's preference for being shown collared with a broken chain attached, signifying that it has broken free from its bondage and refused to be permanently domesticated, what does that particular symbol of freedom and untamed spirit mean for you in your own life today?